I want to talk to you a little about people pleasing, and especially in light of the holiday. And we're in this series called Lionhearted, where we're dealing with some things about courage and uncommon courage. And listen, some of us may struggle with people pleasing 365 days of the year, and I think this will still work towards that. But there is something between Thanksgiving and the New Year, as the holiday kicks up, that for some of us this is very poignant. So my message is a simple one, but I hope it helps in this holiday. You know, there are times that there is something in our lives we need to end up doing a right thing or a healthy thing for us, and we don't do it because of people pleasing. There is at times we say yes to an unhealthy thing or a wrong thing for our life. We know down in our soul, this is not good. And we end up going that way, and it's because of people pleasing. So I want to talk about that. And so how do we move towards this in a healthy way, in a spiritual way? What do the scriptures say about this? And I want to start off about how we can deal with this and keep a spiritual perspective. And this is true for all things spiritual. But the Bible talks about, right, how we grow spiritually. Romans 12:2 I share a lot. It's one of my favorite verses. So look at this. Do not let the world around you squeeze you into its mold, but let God remold your minds from within, so that you may prove in practice that the plan of God for you is good and meets all his demands and moves towards the goal of true maturity. So when it comes to anything in our life, and especially specifically we're talking about what the scriptures say or how we spiritually and in life can deal with people pleasing, how it starts between your ears. It starts when you and I remold our lives and remold our minds towards something better and healthier that God speaks plenty about. So my message is pretty simple in the sense that I want to give you some perhaps truths to hang on to and some guides that can guide you through this whole deal. When Jesus says the truth will set you free, so when we begin to remold our lives and regrow our lives in this people-pleasing area, we start gaining freedom in our lives. So I just want to give you some very clear things. Here's the first one. This Christmas in life, hold on to this. Listen, even God can't please everybody. And the reality is some of you in this room, and especially at the holidays, and especially around your loved ones, you are trying to please everybody. And when you are trying to please everybody, and some of you do this consciously, some of you go into a subconscious default. It's a pattern. What I want you to at least nail down, when you attempt to do that, you are attempting to do something that even God can't do. And God even says, I'm not even going to attempt to do. So the first thing I want you to nail down is to begin to move your life towards this acceptance. When you try to please somebody, you're trying to do something that God doesn't want you to do or attempts to do. You know, it's interesting. In the a few months ago or some series back, we went through the Beatitudes in Matthew 6. The Beatitudes show up also in the Gospel of Luke in a bit of a different form. So I won't go into all of that. I just want to point one as it relates to this. So in the first part of the Beatitudes in chapter 6 of Luke, Jesus says, okay, happy are those that do this, happy are those that do that. You know, if you move your life, that's a good thing. And then he goes into the woes, or kind of unhappy, or how terrible if you do this. And in verse 26, he says this, how terrible for you when all speak well of you. Here it is in an older version. Woe to you when all men speak well of you. Jesus is saying that is not the goal of your life, and it's not a good thing. Why? Because listen, if you and I live a life or attempt to live a life so nobody says anything bad about us, nobody thinks anything bad, we ruffle no feathers, listen, what that potentially could mean is your convictions, they don't run very deep. Or you don't take a stand for something, or stand on principle, or something that's meaningful to you, or a belief, or a boundary. If you live life kind of beckoning to your fears, where nobody says anything bad about you, you may have a very mealy, weak, wishy-washy, controlled, somebody else controls you kind of life. And my guess to you, that's not a great experience, really. And so, listen, maybe about the only time somebody will say, where everybody says something good about me or you is maybe at our funeral. Maybe then, but between then and now, not everybody is going to. In fact, no, I have one pastor friend who got heckled at a funeral. And so I called him up one day. I said, hey, how you doing? He goes, man, I just finished a funeral. I go, how'd that go? He goes, well, not very good. Well, I go, of course, it's a funeral. He goes, no, I got heckled at the funeral. I go, what do you mean you got heckled at the funeral? And so he goes, there was a couple in his church, and their elderly father died. And so this couple in the church said to my friend, the pastor, hey, could you do the pastor for my father? He goes, yeah, absolutely. The funeral for he goes, absolutely, of course. So tell me a little about your father. So my friend is eulogizing the father, saying wonderful things about the guy. And right from the back, somebody goes, no, he isn't. He's not that at all. And starts to tell everybody in the funeral parlor all the bad things about this guy's life. And what it turns out to be, I don't know why I'm telling you this story, but what it turns out to be, this guy had an old, long-lost brother where feelings were hurt like 30 years ago. And he decided to write them at the funeral. Nobody told my pastor friend. So maybe even everybody won't say good things about us at our funeral. So listen, folks, just accept. Just nail down, begin to deal with this reality. Begin to remold your mind this way. Your goal is not to please everybody. God doesn't do that. God can't do that. And he doesn't expect you to do that. Now, here are some things, when we consider with your family, because in the next few weeks, you may be with them. And so when it comes to relationships in our family, I guess there are three things we could do, right? So one of the choices we can do is I'm not going to do a thing. I'm just going to keep things status quo. But for some of you, that's driving you crazy. Status quo is not working. I guess the second thing you could do is I'm going to try to change them. And how's that go, usually? That usually doesn't go well when we try to change other people. And generally, we learn in this life, and we all need to learn it, you can't change other people. So that leaves us with the third thing, which is we can only really change ourselves, take responsibility for ourselves, and begin to remold our lives and remold our mind. And so on this second one, it certainly could mean this. So the first one is you can't please everybody. The second thing I want to say to you is, listen, the quicker and the better and the stronger and the more you can move your life to, I don't need someone else's approval to be happy in this life, you will fare better. And so the scriptures teach over and over, you can't please everybody. You don't have to please everybody. God doesn't expect you to please everybody. You don't need somebody else's approval in you to be happy. And so hold on to that. It's interesting. We're in a political campaign, and when you look at this political campaign, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, to this point, none of that matters. When any person reaches an elected office, especially a high elected office, they usually only get into that office with about anywhere from 45 to 55% of the vote. So every president, every senator, every local mayor, they jump into their office knowing that a huge group of people doesn't approve of them at all. And obviously, if one were going to pursue that, they would understand that. And so what I'm saying for you and me is this. And here's where I'll get really honest with you. Some of us have been trying to please a certain person or a certain group of people all of our lives. And you have spent much effort, much emotion, many prayers, many strategies, many stuffings, many going inward, many performance trying to do this. And some of you have heard messages like this all your life. Listen, why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like your sister? Some of you, you weren't compared to a specific person. An ideal was created for you. Listen, you didn't get A's. I want you to get A's. B's aren't good enough. Or you get A's, they go, I want you to get straight A's. Or this or that. And then for some of us, what has happened in our life, we now have created an ideal of ourselves that we constantly compare ourselves to, and we are letting ourselves down. I'm this and I want to be this, but this is an ideal. And you and I are tortured by thoughts of, why can't I be more like this ideal of me? And so, folks, if you're on the early side of your life, if you're in your 20s and 30s, boy, wouldn't it be great to nail this down? Somebody my age would tell you, nail this down early in your life. But some of you in this room, you're my age, you're in your 50s. Some of you are in your 60s, and you are still trying to please somebody. And you have told yourself, again, consciously or subconsciously, that your significance, your happiness, your meaning is dependent on this person's happiness with you, approval of you. And I believe Jesus wants to set us free from that. Jesus wants to set us free from unhealthy performance, unhealthy acceptance, unhealthy expectations, unhealthy ideals. And I just want to say, about this person that you can't, that's just never happy with you or approved of you. It's not your fault. It's their deal. Every person has strengths and weaknesses. Every person has growth areas. But their constant, chronic disapproval of you that robs you of something, that is not your fault. That has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. So the more and more you and I, like if my hand here represents this thing I need to face, I guess the more I don't look at it or run from it, but the more I face it first, I can't try to please. Even God isn't trying to please everybody. And I don't need this approval to be happy. The more you can begin to remold your life towards that health. And there's no light switch you can flip and go, bang, now I am. And please don't certainly treat a sermon as inspiration, but never treat a sermon like some sort of pep talk that we can just go over to some light switch and go, great. This is why the scriptures say the more we continue to grow and remold our life in the direction and in the being of who God wants us to be, these things grow in our life. And let me make this very spiritual. This is why I talk about a deep devotion to Jesus all the time, a deep devotion. This is why I say all the time that faith is not belief. Faith is trust. And so trust is about reliance and dependence and yielding to and continuing to hold on to and not letting go of. So here's my point. The bigger, the stronger, the deeper God becomes in your life, okay? So the bigger God becomes in your life, the smaller these other things become. The bigger other people become in your life, the bigger other people's approval in your life, the largeness of that and the place it takes in your life, the smaller and the smaller God's perspective is in your life. And so the more you hold on to God with faith, which is trust in him, a daily reliance, a daily turning over, a daily asking God to remold your mind and to move towards these spiritual, deep, loving, healthy things, the bigger that grows, the smaller these other things become. I believe that. And I think God wants to set us free from bitterness, from guilt, from having to make a standard. And God wants us to bloom in feeling loved and accepted and healthy. I love what Jesus says in John 5:41 when he's talking about the people that are giving him biz about not doing what they want him to do. He says, your approval or disapproval means nothing to me. And so that's a very healthy individual, obviously, right? Completely. It's Jesus, utterly. But what he is saying is, for who I am and my meaning and my significance, it's not dependent on either. Meaning I'm not even, some of us, we need approval. And so when it gets it, we go, we're being paid. It's great. But when it's withheld, we go, oh no. That can even be unhealthy, an approval addiction. So some things with your family. Some things to be thinking about moments from now over the next couple weeks when you're with them. I would say, listen, the more you are familiar with, the more you're self-aware, and the more you can prepare for your triggers. The more you know your triggers, the better you can prepare for them. So you go, okay, when Mom and Uncle Joe get in this certain kind of conversation, it starts to send me crazy, right? The more you kind of are aware, going, okay, I am the childless daughter, and I always get stuck taking care of everybody else's kids. The more you're aware of that, the more you're aware of, why does Mom never hold Robbie accountable for anything? The more you're aware of that. How come when I get around my family, I just got a job promotion, and nobody even mentions it? They never mention anything about what's going in my life. The more you're aware of those triggers, those are things that should hurt us. But what I'm trying to say is the more you're aware of those triggers and can apply some of the things I've already mentioned, the better you will be in remolding. And let me say this to you from experience of learning the hard way and wondering, have I learned it enough? But let me just say this. I think it's going to make sense when I say it. When it comes to family, don't take the bait. There are some family members in just weeks from now, a week from now, when you're all together, they will consciously or subconsciously, the holidays will become this, they'll be able to act out their unhealthy patterns and dynamics. There'll be old sibling rivalries, old petty things, old patterns of negativity. And you yourself, if you're well-worn in those patterns and you're not aware of your triggers and somebody says something and boom, right? You're caught up in that. So the more you can be aware of those triggers. Liz, I have plenty of stories with Liz and I where I've taken the bait. And then us riding in, what happened? Or, getting into bed, laying in bed, like, what happened back there? What are you talking about? Or I know, then growing, I know. Or then on the ride over, okay, now remember, someone says, and then that happens, and I look over to Liz, and she's going, giving me the, don't take the bait. And me going, I think I'm going to get a little more Cool Whip for my pumpkin pie. I'll be right back. Counting to 10 in the kitchen, So just the more you can be aware of those things. And I say this seriously, folks, especially in these volatile situations. I say this out of great care, with no judgment at all, great care. Watch the alcohol. Seriously. Watch what can happen, and how that can pay great mind to those triggers. It can just be dangerous. Okay? And here's what I rest in over and over. Isaiah 51:12. Look at this. This is what God says. I am the one who comforts you. So God is saying, listen, I know your emotional needs. I know your relational needs. I know how you were worn out. I know how you're dinged up and hurt on this. I know how that trigger is so close to the surface. I get it. So why are you afraid of mere humans who wither like grass and disappear? You have a God who loves you. You have a God who gives you strength. You have a God who wants you to remold your life and will remold your life in these healthy patterns and free yourself from these things that hurt you. And so just be aware of that. And, last thing, have you ever been in a situation where somebody is putting so much pressure on you to please them? Well, just hold that. That when we unhealthily depend on people or rely on people or expect people to make us happy, that is putting them in a pressure. And you are asking them to do something we said right at the beginning. Even God can't and will not do that. And so continue to hold on to him. And listen, God is not a God who rejects. And so I've experienced my fair amount of rejection in this world. You have too. But in my 30 plus years of walking with him, my spiritual experience is I don't serve or follow or love or have a faith in a God who rejects. He accepts and he loves and he cares. All right, here's another one. What seems so important now is temporary. Sounds simple, but let's do a little test. What were the 3, 4, 5 things important to you in high school? Are they now? It was Billy. It was the cheerleader. It was making that team. Now, I'm not saying those are trite. That's not my point. My point is not that those were trite. My point is they changed. Let's take the 3, 4, 5 things that are important to you now. Run those through your mind right now. The 3, 4, 5 things that are important to you. Set aside that we know is already, it's your family, it's peace on the earth. I get all of that. Okay? That's good. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people pleasing. We're talking about approval. So take the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are important to you now. Here's the thing. Were they important to you 5 years ago? How about this? Let's take the things that were 3, 4, 5 things that were important to you 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Are they still important to you now? If they are, they might have some validity. Here's my point. Those things that are important to us are changing all the time. But we give so much unhealthy energy and unhealthy approval addictions, or we need this to please us, to things that just change. And so the more you are aware of that, just like I was saying, the more God can become deeper, wider, bigger, larger in your life. Things get smaller. I'll do it in this. In theology, we call this an eternal perspective. So these things in your life are important. I'm not validating or invalidating them, but here's how I am qualifying them. The deeper and the larger God is in your life, the closer God is in your life, the more you are intimate with how he feels about you, what he thinks about you, when God looks out the window, how God views the world and views you. The more you are closer, stronger, deeper in that, you may then look at the things that you're giving so much angst about and go, I really need to remold my mind there, because the thing I'm trying to gain so much approval of, so much significance from, this thing I've got to have, it could be material, emotional, relational, this thing Turns out with the track record of my life, it's not going to matter much in 5 years anyway, based on how the rest of my life is gone. So the more you become more aware of that and remold that, you may say, this thing I'm giving so much angst in now, I'm not. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to demand it please me. I'm not going to say I need this to be happy. I'm going to invite God to be deeper, closer, stronger. So he's larger in my life, so these things are smaller. Does that make sense? And I'll tell you what, there's many things that make us mature, but but dealing with maturity on this topic, again, there's other things that make us mature. But when it comes to maturity on this topic, the more you can say, which we've been going over, I can't please you and I don't have to please you. I don't need to please you for my happiness. The more you become like that, the more you can go, okay, this temporal thing, I don't need to make eternal. I need to make eternal things eternal. When you start doing that and remolding that, now you go, okay, now that's maturity. That's maturity. It's not how much we know. It's not how much we espouse. It's when we really see these things taking effect and changing our lives. That's maturity. All right, here's quickly as we close. I really only have to please one person, but look at this, and I'm pleasing already. So this can get funky even spiritually. So obviously what I'm talking about here is God. Really, my life is only meant to please God. But some of us have some bad religion mixed that. We still have approval addiction. We still have a performance stuff that you still feel lousy around God. And you have a God who loves you, who accepts you. God looks at all your strengths, all your weaknesses, all your blemishes, all the places you are a star, all the places where you have shortcomings, all the places we could give you Employee of the Month, all the places that go, you got a lot to work on. And he goes, I love you, I accept you. And really how we please this God most of all, is through a deep relationship. So think of the people that you are truly in love with. Children, spouses, parents, siblings. You know all of their strengths. You've even been hurt by some of their weaknesses. Absolutely. There are some things that you love and admire about them. There are some things that you have to constantly go to places of patience because you go, it would really even help my life if they grew in this. All of that said, when you are deep in a relationship with them, the truth of this scripture, love covers the multitude of sins, is you experience that. When you are deeply connected to somebody, deeply in love with them, their strengths, their weaknesses, you don't need their strengths, you admire and appreciate them, but you love them for who they are. You may at times have to be patient with their weaknesses, but you still forgive and love them because you appreciate them for who they are, and you are experiencing the same thing back from them. Why does it work down here? Because that's how it works up there. I only need to please an audience of one, and how I please this audience of one, this God already is pleased with me, but how I experience his pleasure is by what? Jumping through this hoop, running fast enough, making the team. How I experience his pleasure, him pleased in me, is through a deep, intimate relationship with him. And then I experience that. And then even when God comes to remolding my weaknesses, I'm experiencing his wonderful acceptance and encouragement in my life. Now, isn't that the kind of life we want? It's what I want. So I end with this. Lionel, bring the band out. And I'm going to take us through a little prayer reflection before we go with this whole thing. But listen, hold on to this final truth. God made you perfectly. God made you perfectly. And not just your coolness and perfectness. all your stuff, all your junk, all your blemishes. God looks at you and goes, you are exactly how I want you to be. And listen, when this life is over, and I realize there's great mysteries from this life to the next, but when this life is over, I don't believe God is going to turn to you and me and go, listen, you know what? I wish you were a little more popular. I wish you really accomplished more. I wish you did this. I don't believe that. There is nothing in this that tells me that's the kind of conversation he would have. It might go, I wish you really opened yourself up more to my love. I wish you believed in yourself and how much I believed in you. I wish you were more you, because I made you perfectly. I made you how I wanted you to be. And I'll tell you what, on the young part of life, the middle part of life, and even on the tender side of life, these things are never too early to learn. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to sing a song that you all know. It's Silent Night. Now, why we love Silent Night is because it's about the most meaningful story in our lives. But thematically, why we love this song is it just talks about the God we all dream and want of. And this is a God of peace. So as we sing this song, I'm going to ask you to take your mind to this place, what we've talked about. And then as I close in prayer, I will take you through some prayers that can begin to remold your life, your heart, and your mind. You go to your soulless place. All right, stand up real quick. And let me give you a final blessing. But if you want to stick around, we got a fun little song if you want to stick around, a little instrumental. But if you need to go, you need to go. But really, really, may God bless you with the things we talked about. May you pursue him deeper and deeper. May you let go of this approval addiction. Learn more about it. In fact, that's why I encourage you to go with Journey to Freedom this spring. Learn about this. But may you walk in his love and his acceptance. God bless you. God bless you. See you next week as we talk about what it means to be free from me. See you next week.